we can see that number 3 is going to go up in there. I tend to start from the middle, work my way out. Otherwise, you're reaching over the pipes trying to get them in there. So start from the middle, number 3. It's going to mount up basically like that, the way that the studs are oriented on the bike. So we've got our spring mount on the bottom left, basically the way we're looking at it. That way when it goes on, it'll be like that, and the spring will have a direct shot to the perch there, to the mount.
Right, now we've got all the collars and flanges on. Torque them to spec?
Yeah, we just torque them down to the stock spec, usually between 10 and 15 foot-pounds, depending on the manufacturer, but it doesn't take much. You don't want to overdo it. You'll start bending the flanges. You could ruin the exhaust port studs. So definitely don't overdo it.
Okay, so we'll get that done, then we'll go ahead and fit the primaries, not headers. I know a lot of questions we've got in the past is about anti-seize and how you use it and when should you use it. So in your personal opinion, with work that you do, because you do this all the time, what are your thoughts?
Anti-seize is never a bad idea, particularly on titanium, because the joints in there, the male and female joints that slide together, over time they're exposed to a lot of vibration, a lot of temperature, and it's possible that titanium can pit because titanium has a very low abrasive resistance, very high tensile strength, but low abrasive. So over time you can have pitting in there, particularly if you ride the thing a lot, you're on the track, you're going to be at high RPMs, there's a lot of vibration, so it's always a good idea. I use it when I'm doing titanium particularly.
And then how, on this particular system, prior to our next step, where would you actually put the anti-seize in terms of the pipes themselves?
You can always start with the cylinder head bolts. A little bit in there is never a bad idea. It can help you later if if the system sits on this bike for 2 years and you go to pull it off one day and it's completely frozen up. It'll help you avoid situations like that. I tend to start with a little bit inside the female side of the collar where this is going to slide into, and then on the female joints here, so particularly this, and then where it's going to slide to on this part. So it really helps put it in there and stay and then not have any problems over time. So those joints are really the most important part where you're going to want to have a little bit of anti-seize. You don't have to goop it in there and have it, because it'll pour out, as it heat cycles, it loosens up and will spill out a little. So you don't have to overdo it, just a light film on it and you're fine. So before we hang the primaries, I like to just hang the springs in there first because it's easier to do it now when you don't have the primaries in your way and trying to reach around them and fasten the springs down. So I go through, hang it from the spring hole in the collar and flange, and then get it ready to drop the primaries in, spring them up, and then they're done.
Now, is there any special technique to this? Because I know some of the springs have little pieces that pop in and out, so.
Yeah, they're definitely, this one is all one piece. It's got the little adjustable guys there, but other than that, you want to just get it in there, let it hang down, and you're good.
And then it should tell you as well, you should have a double check then once you put the primary up. The tab that you are going to should line right up with it right away, and you've done it right. So at least you have an opportunity now, if you did screw something up, to just, at this point, back it off and do it again.
Yeah, before we have to take the system off and start over. So,
all right.
Now we can confirm that we've got it all lined up, everything's going to fit right, and just doing it there will save us so much trouble later.
Okay.
So we're just going to start from the middle. Like we looked at before, we have number 2, number 3, so we know from checking our numbers we have our middle cylinders right here, and they're going to fit basically like this. So we go ahead, get our spring puller, slide it up in here, pop it in there into the collar. We've got our springs already hanging down, so we just get that pulled down. Just get that pulled down right here. We can see it lines as a straight shot. Everything's happy there. Oh, look at that. So you've got your collector here. The 4 primaries are going to mate into here, and then it goes from 4 into 2 briefly into 1. This is what we call our collector. We'll slide on, we'll spring it, and then we're ready to go to the mid pipe. So you want to get these somewhat lined up. You can also do this off of the bike and then you end up having to orient these, but I prefer to do it this way because I've got a little more room here as opposed to here. Yeah, it's just getting them started. There we go.
We're all the way back complete now with a little bit of patience. You know, obviously with this, we got to take your time, but
Sure.
it'll go. And now we've got some things that we're going to come into that specifically we need to pay attention to and actually do now before we put the mid pipe on and the rest of the pipe, right?
Yeah, before we go any further on this particular model, 2006, 2007 GSX-R750 and 750, we actually need to remove the shock mount here, because you can see you have the bolt and then the nut here, the bolt sticks out a little bit, and we need that clearance. It's actually really important, because if you don't do this, you're never going to clear it, and then either your muffler will stick out too far or you'll have contact here. So this particular one, we have to undo this shock linkage here, flip it over so the head of the bolt is on this side and the nut is on this side, and then it's a lot shallower and you're fine. It's all that makes all the difference. It's a few millimeters, but it's everything in this particular install.
Wow, tolerances are that tight, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, because we don't have foot pegs, we can't use stands or anything else. We're going to use a scissor jack just to pick the back of the bike up enough to take the tension off the linkage to be able to reverse the bolt in the other direction, tighten it, and then we'll bring it back down. Then we'll continue on with the assembly.
If only we had a suspension guy here. Yeah. Pipe guys don't need to be touching this stuff. Ready?
Yep. There it goes. Sweet. As Eric Cartman would say, sweet.
Sweet.
You got it?
I'll hold the wheel.
Chain, stand. Okay, I get it.
Flip it.
Ooh. Okay.
Okay. So we go through, we've got our final collector here. It's going to fit up. Comes down at a slight angle, which is normal. And then we're going to fit the silencer. Now that we've flipped our nut and bolt over for the lower shock linkage, we're going to have enough to tuck that silencer in here the way it needs to be and not have any clearance issues.
Where's the main clearance problem going to be?
Generally, it's going to be the top of the silencer and this frame cross member right here.
Okay.
You'll see if you have it tucked up a little too much, you might touch there. Or if you try to compensate when you're doing this wrong here, you'll have the muffler sticking out too far. So you have to find that sweet spot of where it's going to tuck in nice and tight without any contact.
So yeah, and the dry assembly just gives you the opportunity to figure it all out, look at it and make sure it's all right.
Right.
Are there any components when we're putting the muffler on that we need to seat in preparation for that?
Yeah, we do. We have this bracket here that's going to fit in the foot pegs, behind the foot peg there. It has the mount for the clamp, the carbon clamp that goes around the muffler. Okay. So we're gonna put everything on there loose and then situate it where it needs to be for clearance before we tighten it down.
Okay.
Very important.
Okay, so now we come to, as you've pointed out in our conversation, some of the key and most important parts of putting the system on, because if you forget certain things, you're going to have all kinds of problems. So in this, the first thing we just talked about was the orientation of the can itself to the frame. And so what else do we need to pay real attention to?
Particularly like we already did here, you can see the instructions for the shock linkage.
Right.
That's the foot peg mount, as you can see here in the diagram. We're going to replace it with a longer bolt that goes through the bottom, because that's where our tab's going to mount here to mount the carbon clamp.
Okay.
So we have to do this just as specified, just through that mount with the particular bolt, or it's not going to work out.